It all started with a deadline. If you're a writer, you know the special kind of dread that comes from a blinking cursor on a blank page. It's a void waiting for monsters, but my void was stubbornly empty. My agent was calling, my publisher was emailing, and my rent was due. I needed a story, and I needed it yesterday. That's when I got the idea, born from desperation, and the weird corners of the internet. For weeks, my feeds have been flooded with these things. Labubu dolls. They're these toothy, big-eared, elf-like creatures that are somehow both cute and deeply unsettling. People were obsessed. They were clipping them to designer bags, and some were paying thousands, even hundreds of thousands, for rare editions. But there was a darker side to the trend. A growing number of owners were telling stories online. They whispered about dolls that seemed to move on their own, of faint giggles in the middle of the night, and of waking up within red scratches they couldn't explain. People on TikTok and Reddit were calling them demonic, cursed, and evil. It was perfect. The plan was simple. I buy one of these supposedly haunted dolls, use it as my muse, and channel all that creepy internet lore into a novel. I wasn't a believer, not really. To me, it was just a modern ghost story, collective anxiety, turning a toy into a villain. It was a gimmick to break my writer's block. I found a seller online who specialized in items with a history. The doll was a standard Labubu, but its description was anything but. Previous owner reported feelings of being watched, objects moving in disturbing dreams. Sold as a novelty collector's item only. I clicked by now without a second thought. I had no idea I wasn't just buying a prop. I was casting the main character, and it had already decided how the story would end. Section 1. The first word. The doll arrived on a Tuesday. It was smaller than I expected, with a mischievous grin that felt like it was hiding a secret. I named him Blink, a nod to one of the first viral stories I'd read about a girl who swore she saw her Labubu's eyes flicker. I put him on the corner of my desk, his wide plastic eyes facing my laptop, and I started to write. For the first time in months, the words just flowed. My main character, Elias, is a young artist living alone, a lot like me. For inspiration, he buys a haunted doll. I described the heavy silence of his apartment, the way every creak of the floorboards at night sounds like a footstep. I wrote a scene where Elias, working late, hears a faint noise, a dry, scratching sound, like a rat scrabbling inside the walls. He paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. It was a faint, almost imperceptible sound. Scritch, scritch, scratch, coming from the wall behind his bookshelf. He told himself it was nothing, just old pipes, just the building settling. I finished the chapter, feeling that amazing rush of accomplishment. The story was finally alive. I shut my laptop, stretched, and headed to bed, leaving Blink sitting on the desk in the moonlight. That night, a noise woke me up. Scritch, scritch, scratch. It was quiet, almost lost under the city's hum. But it was there, coming from the wall behind my bookshelf. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sat bolt upright, straining to hear. Silence. It was just my imagination, I told myself. I'd been writing about that exact sound for hours. Of course I was hearing it. The mind plays tricks, especially when you've been swimming in suspense all day. I lay back down, pulled the covers to my chin, and eventually fell back asleep, completely unaware that the first line of my story had just been edited into reality. Section 2, the escalation. The next few days were a blur of pure productivity. The story was pouring out of me. Every time I sat down to write, with Blink perched on my desk, the words just came. I wrote about Elias's paranoia growing, how he starts to feel like he's not alone, that he's being watched. I described a scene in detail where Elias becomes convinced the doll's eyes are following him around the room. He'd glance at the doll, and its head would be facing forward. He'd turn away, work for a few minutes, then that prickling on the back of his neck would make him look again. This time, its head would be tilted. Its painted smile seemed wider, more knowing. He measured the angle with his eyes. It was different. He was sure of it. Or was he just losing his mind? I was proud of that part. It perfectly captured that psychological spiral. I stood up to make coffee, my back to the desk. The apartment was still. When I turned back around, my blood went cold. Blink's head was tilted, just a few degrees to the left. A tiny shift, but I knew it was different. I just stared, my mind scrambling for a logical reason. A truck passing outside? Did I bump the desk? No, the desk is solid oak. I hadn't touched it. I walked over and picked the doll up. It was just plastic. Its head could swivel, sure, but not by itself. I let out a shaky, unconvincing laugh. You're really getting in my head, aren't you? I said to the doll, feeling like an idiot. I set it back down, made sure its head was perfectly straight, and took a picture with my phone. A baseline. Proof. But the doubt was there now, planted like a poisonous seed. Was this still just a gimmick? The line between my story and my life was starting to blur. People online talked about this oppressive energy, the constant feeling of being watched. I dismissed it as internet hysteria. But standing there in my own apartment, I wasn't so sure anymore. I tried to shake it off. Coincidence. Trick of the light. But when I went to bed that night, I locked Blink in my desk drawer, just in case. Section 3. The point of no return. The next morning, the drawer was open. The doll was back on my desk, staring right at me. Cold, sharp panic hit me. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't my imagination. Someone had to have been in my apartment. I checked the locks. The deadbolt was thrown, the chain still on. No one could have gotten in. My mind was spinning, grabbing for any rational thought. But all I could hear were those internet comments. They move on their own. They open things. You're not alone. A strange, terrifying pull drew me to my laptop. It was open, the screen glowing, and there was a new paragraph on the page. One I didn't write. Elias thought he could lock it away. He thought he was in control. But the story has to be told. The final chapter is already written. Tonight, the door will lock for good. He will not leave this room, and the doll will get up from its chair. The words swam in front of my eyes. My blood ran cold. The doll wasn't my muse. It was my co-writer. It was guiding my hands, feeding me the story it wanted to tell. A story where I wasn't the writer anymore. I was the main character. The noises, the doll moving, it was all real. I was living the plot of my own horror novel. I had to get out. I grabbed my keys and lunged for the door. As my hand closed around the knob, I heard it. A loud, metallic click. The deadbolt sliding shut. I twisted the knob, rattling it frantically. Locked. I was trapped. My breath hitched. I turned around slowly, my eyes pulled against my will to the corner of the room. Blink was no longer on my desk. It was sitting in the armchair across the room, head tilted, its wide, painted smile stretching in the dim light, just like I had written, just like we had written. The blinking cursor on my laptop screen seemed to be calling me. The story needed an ending. My story. And with a dawning, soul-crushing horror, I realized the doll wasn't going to write it. I was. It needed me to type the last words. With trembling hands, feeling like a puppet, I walked back to my desk. I sat down, my eyes locked on the doll in the chair. My fingers moved to the keyboard, a final, chilling sentence taking shape on the screen, describing the last moment of a writer who got too close to his subject. I typed the final word as the small, elfin figure in the chair began to slowly, impossibly, rise to its feet.